The first thing I'd like to do is just inform you that I have a piece of good news, and this is the last time that you'll be hearing from me. So, after, what has it been, 41 introductions or something, that should be a welcome news. I'd like to, for the final time of this conference, acknowledge and deeply thank our sponsors who have made this conference accessible to more than 2,000 people by helping to fund it, and they are noted up on the screens. So thank you, sponsors, and for those of you sitting at the table with someone from a company sponsoring this, please let them know how much we appreciate it. The Clean Air, Clean Jobs Act has been called one of the most significant pieces of legislation for our industry in decades. So that's what we're going to hear about in this panel. If, like me, you've been at this for 4 days, you might feel like your brain is full. But I have, again, another quote since I stopped being original 2 days ago. And the quote for us is, "Don't pray for lighter burdens, but for stronger backs." So suck it up, everybody. This is good stuff. It's worth the effort. Keep your mind and your brain open. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend and our board member, David Posner. He's founder and president of nVent Energy. In addition to his many distinguishing credentials, which I'm sure you'll read tonight in our program book, he has over 30 years of experience. Please join me in a huge warm welcome, your last warm welcome with me for our fabulous panel and David Posner.
Thank you, Tisha. And our panel today, we have basically the key principles, many behind the scenes that helped put together the coalition and the insight and understanding to make this concept of using natural gas as a aid to enhance the front range air quality. That this group helped put it together. But obviously the critical piece related to making the legislation happen is not sitting at this table today, but we certainly need to recognize the representatives and senators from the legislature who pioneered this and pushed it through. The key core sponsors in the House, Ellen Roberts and Judy Solano. I know Ellen was here earlier. Are you still here, Ellen? Okay. And then on the Senate, Josh Penry and Bruce Whitehead. And clearly without their initiative and what was the word that Scott Moore used today? I think it was some kind of informed courage. They helped and obviously were the key players in making this initiative a reality. So could we give a round of applause for the sponsors? So what we're going to do as a format is have each one of our panelists take about 5 minutes and give their thoughts and perspective on the origins of this initiative, what the significance of it is from their point of view. And we're going to start first with Martha Rudolph, who's the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Health and Environment. Martha?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about a very historic piece of legislation without a lot of work and a lot of effort by folks in this room, and folks not in this room could not have been achieved. I'm happy to be part of that. I will have to tell you in January whether I am happy being part of it right now. But things are going pretty well. So 5 minutes, I got to move fast. I was asked to talk about sort of what the how it evolved, how we got this bill, what was the process to get it passed, to get it through, get the group together to congeal on this, and then what's the perspective of CDPHE and the state? Why are we interested in this? So I'm going to hit some really highlights on that. First, I want to say that two important people from the state perspective that are no longer with the state, perhaps that's telling, but who were very instrumental in working on this are Jim Martin, who was my predecessor at the department and then became the predecessor then became the executive director of DNR and now is the regional administrator for EPA, Region 8, and Kelly Nordini, who was with the governor's office and now is with Western Conservation Foundation, thank you. They were very instrumental early on and often in getting this through. So how did this come together? For those of you that were watching it from the outside, I'm sure it hit like a hurricane, was introduced in the legislature, and I think was passed through both houses and was really on the governor's desk in just slightly over 2 weeks. I think it's largely unprecedented they went through that fast. I can tell you that it took months and months of work to really get it to that point so that it could get through the legislature. Some of the key, I think this is a deal that is really no different than many other deals that we all work on in the private sector, in the government sector, and in both working between the government and the private. You look at what's the goal, what are you trying to achieve, are there commonalities in wanting to achieve that, who are the key players that you want to bring in the tent, and you want to bring people in the tent to help you with this, because the more people that are outside the tent, the more likely you're going to have torches thrown at it. So you want to figure out what are the common goals, what are the common drivers, and in this situation, as you'll probably hear as we talk about this, the people that were interested in this piece of legislation had different drivers. From our perspective, one of the primary drivers at CDPHE was air quality improvement. I mean, that's probably pretty obvious. From the natural gas perspective, it is a market for natural gas. Those things could work together. From the environmental perspective, you're going to hear from Pete. He's going to talk about that. I think it's probably a little bit of both. Certainly, human health is part of it. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why people wanted to pursue this. You identify them, you talk to those people, you start talking ideas about what can we do so that your goals are achieved, our goals are achieved, and we can do it in a way that works for everybody. I want to say that I think one of the key reasons that this worked, and really why it's hard to say when did this start, is that the relationships that have been really built up over the years. In order to start having these kind of conversations with folks, you have to have a pretty good relationship. You have to have a trust with folks. You have to have the ability to communicate ideas and not be fearful about what will happen with those ideas, that you're really taking at your word and you really want to do something together. And it does take time for those relationships to build, and in some cases it can take years for those relationships to build. But eventually, I think what ends up happening is that you can start having these conversations, you know, at lunch, and then you have a meeting, and then you kind of bring a larger group together, and you bring a group together, and pretty soon you're all kind of talking about the same thing. One of the things that I think really helped drive this particular piece of legislation was the time constraints. When we started meeting on this really earlier this year, started actually putting pen to paper, I mean, we had some really heavy taskmasters that said, you're not leaving this room. You're not leaving this room until you actually have agreed on something, or you've actually written something down, or you actually have decided something. And if we have to bring in vegan pizza for lunch, that's what we will do. But you're going to have to stay here. I mean, it was one of the jokes. And then ultimately, what does CDPH want out of this? What does the state want out of this? We really see a lot of great environmental benefits from this. If you heard Kennedy speak yesterday, I mean, he went through a long litany of different things, including a lot of human health aspects to switching to natural gas. that goes without saying. We're looking at regional haze, we're looking at ozone. Ozone is going to be tremendously difficult for us to achieve in this state to meet whatever the new standard is going to be. And converting from a coal-fired unit to either natural gas or some other energy efficiency will have tremendous benefit from that purpose, for that purpose. And one last thing, I would be very remiss if I didn't say that truly one of the reasons that the state supported this was also the homegrown energy piece of this. The fact that we've got large reserves of natural gas in the state, and that we could tap into those natural gas reserves and help fuel the gas-fired units that would come online, assuming that for the 900 megawatts that are going to be converted. And that really was a significant driver for this administration, and I want to make sure that's underscored. So I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. And our next panelist is David Eves, who's the president and CEO of Public Service Company of Colorado.
Thank you, David. Let me start by attesting to the story Martha told. I believe there was a threat or an edict from Jim Martin that we weren't leaving, and the pizza was supposed to be bad. So we did actually accomplish a lot that day. I'd like to do three things. Build a little bit on what Martha described in terms of why this is happening here in Colorado and kind of the genesis of why I think the ground zero for the national debate and battle, if you will, between coal and gas is happening here. I want to talk real quickly about some things that are very important in terms of enabling the regulatory agencies and our company and everyone involved in this to make this happen. And finally, I want to touch on two things that, at least from my perspective as a customer of the gas industry, two things that I think are really important as you potentially move this cause around the country and pursue it elsewhere. So why is this ground zero? Obviously, at a national level, I think we have the confluence of two things. We have the series of environmental regulations that, if you own and operate coal plants, look really scary right now. Everything, we start with regional haze, we'll be dealing with ozone, small particulate matter, mercury removal, ash disposal, and you can go on, SO2. And there will be a continuum of requirements, and it's really difficult to think about what upgrades and life extensions you make to a high-value, long-lived asset, not knowing exactly what the future regulations are going to be, and if they make those investments uneconomical after you've sunk into a plant a lot of money already. So we have the combination of the environmental regulations that are coming at us and the great changes that have occurred in the gas industry in terms of the available supply that's been discovered and that will be available to the marketplace over the last few years and looking forward. Those are national things, so I think the opportunity may abound everywhere in the country. But you look at the other things that drove this in Colorado, and I think, just to brag a tiny bit, I think the environmental leadership of our company, our chairman's got a strong philosophy about being proactive and ahead of the curve and trying to find ways to deal with the requirements before they're actually thrust upon the front door. The fact that there's already been so much wind generation